This Black History Month, we're highlighting the contribution of African Americans. Two trailblazing sisters who helped pioneer modern musical theater were from Sacramento. The duo helped change the course of popular entertainment, from one that ridiculed African Americans to one that portrayed them with dignity. We want to warn you, this story includes racist, historical images and accounts that may be difficult to watch. We did seek the input of Black community members, historians, and colleagues to ensure we produced this story in a respectful and responsible manner and only for educational purposes.
I just wanted to look this up.
Sushil Bibbs plays many roles, including classical singer, filmmaker,
They put opera in their musicals.
and researcher, as she showed us in her Sacramento home.
20 years of research on Mary Ellen Pleasant.
Through her research on Mary Ellen Pleasant, known as the mother of civil rights in California, Bibbs learned about the contributions of a largely unsung pair of sisters who changed the face of musical theater in more ways than one.
We owe them the concept of humanness of African Americans and trying to portray that.
Anna and Emma Hyers grew up in Sacramento in the 1860s, performing opera with their parents from a young age.
The father and mother were amateur opera singers.
Bibbs researched and made several award-winning documentaries on the Hyers sisters, blending history with recreations of their performances. She says the two eventually embarked on an opera career as a duo, becoming the very first African-American women to entertain white audiences while touring across the U.S., garnering acclaim in the post-Civil War Reconstruction era.
They were so popular that when they got to New York, they had a distinction of becoming the first African American women to be on a mixed stage in a mainstream white Caucasian audience.
That was no small accomplishment, especially against the backdrop of another type of performance popular at the time called a minstrel show.
Gentlemen, be seated!
Bibbs uses these racist images in her documentaries and walked us through some of them during our interview. It's important to show them, she told us, because if you don't see the imagery, you don't understand what the Hyers sisters were up against and fighting for.
It's hard to watch, isn't it?
It's very hard to watch. Whenever I see it, as many times as I've seen it, I just shake my head.
Minstrel shows got their start in the 1830s and 40s. White actors donned blackface, painting their face with burnt cork and portraying offensive caricatures of African Americans.
It's making fun of the way people talked also.
As she and retired public historian Dr. Rick Moss explained, these insulting performances were vile attempts at giving white audiences justification for slavery before and during the Civil War, portraying the false narrative that Black people were ignorant and inferior. And the depictions only got worse.
After the Civil War, it became angry. Then it became something biting and harsh.
In the decades following the war, minstrel shows only grew in popularity among white audiences as more African Americans, especially formerly enslaved people, gained access to education, wealth, land, and political power. Bibbs points out these biting depictions had long-lasting harm, influencing culture, people, and eventually racist policies such as the separate but equal doctrine and Jim Crow laws that enforced racial segregation well into the 20th century, effects which still impact Black Americans to this day.
Even though the proponents of slavery lost, their belief in the inferiority of Black people did not disappear.
Dr. Rick Moss is the former chief curator and director of the African American Museum and Library at Oakland and provides important historical perspective. He says minstrel shows were so popular and lucrative after the Civil War, some African Americans formed their own minstrel troupes and performed in blackface using burnt cork just like white minstrel performers.
On the part of those performers, they had to make a living. They had to live and had to eat. Would it be easier digging the ditch, towing the bale, right? Or going on stage and performing and being something that you know you're not? So it was survival, I believe.
We're talking about the offensive imagery and portrayals in minstrel shows to put into context what the Hyers sisters did next, instead of pursuing an international opera career.
The Hyers in 1876 decided they weren't going to Europe. They were going to abandon a dream for the greater good, and they were taught that it had to do with their people being free and free of the bondage of the imagery that the black-faced minstrels put upon them.
Seeing the growing hostilities against African Americans, the Hyers sisters started their own touring theater company called the Hyers Comic Opera Company.
They were the ones responsible for the first American musical. Not the first African American musical, the first American musical.
They produced several musicals and toured for some 20 years, all without the use of blackface.
They focused these stories on the African American experience from slavery to freedom, to see African Americans as human beings. They had white and black in a cast. They had dancers, and nobody had blackface. And so you're looking at something really revolutionary.
She says the work of the Hyers sisters and other pioneering black artists helped lead to an end of minstrel shows.
Something else came along to replace it, and black people had a large hand in making sure there was something much better. Those little battles being fought, whether to cork or uncork or not cork, play the banjo or not. It's a pretty rich legacy.
A rich legacy that lives on in this storyteller.
It was really something to make that change and to go against what people expected of me.
Bibbs going from a career in classical music to telling the stories of black women trailblazers through documentary filmmaking.
My name is Mary E. Pleasant.
That's what the Hyers did. They connected with that in me, that ability to connect your dreams with your values.
We had a lot of internal discussions and collaborated with African American community members and colleagues about how to use the racist images in a responsible way and only to educate and tell this important story. Everyone we spoke to emphasized the importance of showing the images to acknowledge America's dark past and fully understand the African American experience. And while doing so, celebrating the resilience of the community, as clearly demonstrated by the efforts of the Hyers sisters. And if you're interested in watching one of Sushil Bibb's documentaries on the Hyers sisters, it's available for rent or purchase on Vimeo. We put a link on our website, abc10.com/link.